The sun rose slowly over the Halle mansion, a place famous for its long driveway, silver fountain, and towering marble pillars. The mansion stood like a silent king on the hill, watching the city from above. And inside those walls lived a billionaire whose name everyone respected. Andrew Halle. Andrew was known for his calm nature, his honesty, and his unusual kindness toward the people who worked for him. Unlike most powerful men, he never raised his voice, never insulted anyone, and never forgot to say thank you. Even his business rivals admitted that he was different, a man who had earned his success instead of inheriting it. But every beautiful mansion hides shadows, and Andrew's biggest shadow walked around wearing diamonds, perfume, and a perfect smile. Her name was Vivian Halle, the billionaire's wife. Elegant on the outside yet frozen on the inside, she carried herself like a queen. Expecting the entire world to revolve around her, she enjoyed attention, parties, and social power far more than she enjoyed her own marriage, and though no one knew it, she had long stopped loving Andrew. Instead, she loved only the empire he had built and the fortune attached to his name. Among the staff working in this quiet battlefield was a woman named Mara Thompson. Mara had come to the mansion 3 years ago, shy and gentle, with a strong work ethic and eyes that always noticed more than she ever said. She was in her late 20s and carried herself with quiet dignity. Her uniform was always clean, her hair always tied neatly, and her hands always busy. Even though she was a maid, she walked with a certain grace that made everyone respect her. She spoke softly, she never gossiped, and she avoided trouble like fire. But trouble, it seemed, was slowly walking toward her. Mara had learned the rhythm of the mansion. Andrew left early for meetings. Vivian woke up late on purpose so she would not have to see him at breakfast. The chefs prepared fine meals that mostly went untouched. The gardeners worked outside while the maids cleaned silently inside. And Mara, unlike the others, paid attention to details. She noticed when things changed, and lately, too many things were changing. It began with the atmosphere. Andrew had started looking tired. Not physically but emotionally, his shoulders slumped more. His eyes carried an invisible weight. Sometimes Mara would find him sitting alone in his study, staring at the floor as if searching for answers inside the carpet pattern. He was polite as always, but his smiles were shorter, weaker, almost forced. Mara wondered if he slept well, because he looked like a man fighting battles no one else could see. Vivian, on the other hand, moved through the mansion like a storm cloud. She snapped at the maids, yelled at the chefs, and complained about almost everything. She accused the laundry staff of shrinking her clothes. She shouted at the driver for arriving 2 minutes late, and she rolled her eyes whenever Andrew spoke to her. A few times Mara had seen Vivian talking angrily on the phone, pacing back and forth near the balcony, whispering accusations and threats into the receiver, but whenever someone approached, she would instantly switch her expression into a soft smile. Acting as though she had been discussing something harmless, one afternoon, Mara walked past the kitchen and saw something that made her pause. Vivian stood at the counter preparing a drink for Andrew. This was surprising, because Vivian never stepped into the kitchen unless she was criticizing the staff or stealing fruit from the fridge during her diets. But today she was stirring something into a glass of fresh orange juice. Her hand moved carefully, too carefully, as if she wanted whatever she was adding to disappear completely. When she heard Mara's footsteps, she quickly slid the small bottle into her pocket and forced a bright smile, pretending she had just mixed the drink normally. Mara blinked but said nothing. Her heart beat a little faster, though she did not know why. From that day onward, Mara observed more. Every morning, Vivian insisted on preparing Andrew's first drink of the day. At first, she blamed the staff for being incompetent, But Mara noticed she never let anyone else near that glass once the special tonic was added. Andrew drank it without question, trusting his wife because the drink was presented with soft words like, "It will help you relax," or "It's good for your health." Mara felt uneasy, but she had no proof that anything was wrong. Still, something inside her shifted, and she began watching Vivian more closely. Late one night, as Mara walked past the office on her way to finish folding laundry, she heard voices inside. The door was open a little, and curiosity pulled her closer. Vivian was arguing with someone over the phone. Her voice was sharp, filled with impatience. "I told you it must be done soon," Vivian whispered harshly. "I can't wait much longer." "You promised this would be quick." The tone sent a shiver through Mara's body. Vivian ended the call the moment she heard a soft sound from the hallway. Mara pretended to be passing by, but she knew Vivian had felt watched. The next morning, Mara found shredded papers in the trash beside Vivian's dresser, torn in small pieces, but not small enough to hide the words. Mara picked up one piece and read the phrase "inheritance execution." Another piece said "division of assets." Another said, "in the event of incapacitation." Mara felt her breath stop. The words were not normal. They suggested legal planning for something serious, something involving Andrew's health, or, worse, Mara forced herself to bury the pieces back under the trash and step away. Her hands shook the entire time she changed the bedsheets. The mansion grew colder with each passing day. Vivian smiled less, Andrew trusted more, and Mara stood silently in the middle. Torn between fear and loyalty, she wanted to warn Andrew, but she had nothing solid to show him. And Vivian was powerful. If Mara accused her without proof, she would be fired instantly and possibly blacklisted from finding work elsewhere. The Hale mansion was her livelihood, but Andrew Hale's safety felt heavier than her own fears. One Sunday evening, Andrew returned home earlier than usual. Mara was dusting the hallway when he paused and asked her gently, "Mara, everything all right?" She nodded, but her eyes betrayed worry. Andrew looked at her for a moment. Sensing something unspoken, he wanted to ask more, but he was too exhausted to dig deeper. So he simply gave her a tired smile and walked toward his room. Mara watched him go, wondering how much danger he was truly in that night. When the mansion was quiet and the staff had retreated to their quarters, Mara sat on her small bed and thought about everything she had seen. Vivian's anger, the mysterious phone calls, the secret bottle, the shredded documents, Andrew's fading health, it all connected into a terrifying shape she was scared to name. She felt like she was holding a puzzle but missing the final piece. And that missing piece kept her awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, praying she was wrong. The next morning, Vivian announced that she would be planning a romantic dinner for Andrew. Mara felt her heartbeat jump. Something about the announcement felt dangerously timed. Vivian told the staff to stay out of the kitchen in the evening, insisting she would cook everything herself. Mara felt her anxiety rise like boiling water. She sensed danger moving closer, step by step, and she had no idea how she would face what was coming. But deep inside, she knew one thing for certain. Something was terribly wrong in the Hale mansion, and soon, a moment would come when she would have to decide whether to stay silent or risk everything to save the man who had always treated her with kindness. Asterisk. The week following the romantic dinner announcement felt strangely quiet in the Hale mansion. A silence that did not bring peace but carried the weight of secrets. Vivian moved through the halls with a confidence that felt unnatural, almost rehearsed, as if she were preparing for a final performance. Every step she took echoed like a warning, but no one except Mara felt it. Andrew, exhausted from work and worn down emotionally, barely noticed anything unusual. He simply assumed his wife was being kinder again. And he wanted to believe it, even if it wasn't true. Vivian began spending more time alone in her private lounge, a velvet-covered room that smelled of perfume and ambition. She locked the door often, sometimes for hours inside. She made phone calls that she never wanted anyone to hear. Her voice was calm on the outside, but sharp as broken glass underneath. Mara would pass by and hear fragments of conversation. Words like deadline, transfer, final signature, and liquidate. None of these words belonged in a normal marriage, and certainly not in a romantic dinner preparation. On one particular afternoon, Vivian argued quietly with someone over the phone, her voice trembling not with fear but with frustration. "I need this to happen smoothly," she hissed. "He trusts me completely. Don't complicate things." Then she paused as if listening, tapping her nails against the glass table. "No, he has no idea. But I can't wait longer." There was a dangerous certainty in her tone, the kind of certainty a person has only when they believe that everything is under their control. Mara listened for as long as she safely could before slipping away, her heart racing like a drum. Meanwhile, Andrew moved around his own mansion like a guest. Unaware of the storm building around him, he trusted Vivian because he had built his marriage on good intentions, believing that love could be repaired with patience. He did not know that Vivian had already packed away her love long ago. Sealing it behind walls made of greed, Andrew believed the romantic dinner was a sign of healing, a chance to fix years of emotional distance. For him, the dinner represented hope, but for Vivian, it represented timing. Mara felt the mansion changing little by little, something shifting in the air. She noticed Vivian spending unusually long hours in the guest bathroom, mixing things, measuring things, flushing tiny bits of evidence. She noticed small bottles disappearing into Vivian's purse, bottles that did not belong to any regular household routine. Once, when Mara entered Vivian's room to place clean sheets, she found a folded paper carelessly left behind on the dresser. Mara didn't mean to look, but her eyes fell on the bold printed text before she could stop herself. It read, "Medical stabilizer, high sedative properties, use with caution." Mara felt her breath stick in her throat. She placed the paper back exactly where she found it and stepped out quietly. Her mind racing, Vivian, unaware of how much Mara had begun noticing, continued her preparations. She called the head chef and ordered him not to cook anything for the dinner. Claiming she wanted the meal to be intimate and personal, she dismissed the kitchen staff early that evening, giving them a forced smile that did not reach her eyes. Then she went shopping for ingredients she never cooked with, herbs she never used, and drinks she never liked. She returned with bags full of expensive wine and imported spices, but the only thing she carried in her purse was a small glass bottle wrapped carefully in a silk handkerchief. While Vivian planned her flawless evening, Mara grew more anxious. She had never been a confrontational person. She disliked arguments, avoided conflicts, and believed in solving problems quietly, but this situation was not quiet anymore. It was turning into something dangerous, something she could no longer ignore. She tried convincing herself that maybe she was imagining too much. Maybe her fears were exaggerated, but deep down, her instincts repeated the same message again and again. Vivian Hawley was preparing something that had nothing to do with romance. And then came a moment that left Mara shaken for hours. It happened while she was collecting laundry from Andrew's room. Andrew had left his desk drawer slightly open. Inside, Mara saw a document she had never seen before. A revised version of Andrew's will, dated only a week earlier. It stated that if anything happened to him, illness, incapacity, or sudden health decline, Vivian would take temporary control of all assets until a full legal assessment could be made. The document was not suspicious on its own, but the timing, combined with Vivian's recent behavior, turned it into a frightening clue, Mara stepped back slowly. Realizing Vivian was planning not just an evening, but an entire outcome that evening, Mara walked into the dining area and found Vivian adjusting the table. Vivian's face lifted into a smile that looked warm but felt cold. "Make sure everything is spotless," Vivian instructed, smoothing the red velvet table runner with her manicured fingers. "Tonight is important." There was something chilling in the way she said it. Something final, as if the dinner wasn't just a dinner but a closing chapter. Mara nodded respectfully, though her stomach twisted into knots. Throughout the day, Vivian rehearsed lines in her head. Mara didn't hear the full sentences, only pieces as Vivian walked past mirrors whispering, "After tonight, things will change. He won't see it coming, finally." Freedom. Vivian was not speaking like a woman who wanted to fix her marriage. She was speaking like someone about to carry out a plan she believed no one suspected. Mara began to feel a heavy fear inside her chest, a fear she had never felt before. She wanted to run to Andrew and warn him, but all she had were suspicions and scattered pieces of evidence. And Vivian was powerful enough to crush her if she tried and failed. The night before the planned dinner, Mara found herself unable to sleep. She sat on her small bed, hugging her knees, staring at the clock as the minutes stretched endlessly. She replayed every strange moment she had seen, every bottle, every whisper, every shredded document, every forced smile. Like pieces of a puzzle that spelled out danger, Mara whispered to herself, "He needs to know," but then shook her head. "But what if I'm wrong?" She could not risk accusing someone like Vivian without proof. She could lose her job, her home, her safety. Staff members had been fired for far smaller misunderstandings. Vivian did not tolerate disobedience, and she certainly did not tolerate being challenged. Mara felt trapped, caught between her conscience and her fear. The next morning, Vivian seemed unusually cheerful, humming softly as she walked around the house. Her steps were light, her eyes bright with anticipation. She treated Andrew with sweet politeness, something she rarely did. Andrew felt hopeful again, thinking maybe, finally, they were healing. He told Mara with a gentle smile, "Vivian is trying her best." "Don't you think?" Mara forced a nod, unable to speak. The words stuck in her throat like thorns. She wanted to shout the truth, but she remained silent, trembling inside. By noon, Vivian had locked herself in the kitchen, asking no one to disturb her. The smell of rich spices filled the mansion, mixed with the sound of glasses clinking and something being stirred repeatedly. Mara passed the kitchen door once and almost knocked to ask if she could help, but something inside warned her not to. The door stayed closed, the silence behind it heavy and dangerous. Mara felt an invisible countdown beginning. Every hour brought the dinner closer. Every minute made her fear sharper. She knew something terrible was approaching. She could feel it in her bones, in her heartbeat, in the quiet halls of the mansion that suddenly felt like a trap. And by the time the sun began setting behind the mansion's tall windows, painting the halls gold and crimson, Mara understood one thing clearly. The romantic dinner was not a celebration. It was a turning point, a dangerous moment waiting to unfold, and she, somehow, would be right in the middle of it. Asterisk, the morning of the dinner arrived with a strange heaviness in the air, as if the mansion itself sensed what was coming. Mara stepped into the hallway carrying her cleaning tray, but she felt something different in her chest, something tight and cold, like a warning she could not ignore. She had felt worried before, but today her fear transformed into something sharper, something that crawled under her skin and refused to leave. Every sound echoed louder than usual. A door closing, footsteps on marble, the rustle of curtains. It felt as if the mansion was whispering to her, telling her to pay attention, telling her not to look away. Vivian, dressed in a silky robe, moved through the house with unusual excitement. Humming a song Mara had never heard before, the humming wasn't joyful but eerie. Like someone rehearsing for a performance that only she understood, Mara tried to carry on with her duties, but she found herself watching Vivian more than cleaning. Vivian checked her watch constantly, rehearsed her expressions in mirrors, and whispered to herself while stirring ingredients in a small bowl she kept hidden from the rest of the staff. Mara noticed Vivian kept touching her purse, adjusting it, protecting it, making sure no one came near it. Something was inside that purse, something important to her plan. Something Mara feared was connected to Andrew's fate tonight. Andrew, meanwhile, was unaware of how close danger stood to him. He walked around the mansion speaking kindly to the staff, thanking them for their efforts. His smile was tired but hopeful, as if he truly believed the dinner tonight would heal his wounded marriage. Mara watched him from across the room and felt guilt squeeze her heart. He trusted his wife without question, and Mara could not understand why fate had made her the one to witness the truth while Andrew remained blind to it. Around noon, Mara entered the dining room to adjust the candles and found Vivian already there. Vivian stood at the table arranging the silverware with precise, almost obsessive movements. The table was covered in red roses, crystal glasses, and shimmering plates. It looked like the perfect romantic scene. But something about it felt wrong, too perfect, too dramatic, like a painting hiding a dark story behind its beauty. Vivian noticed Mara and gave her a smile too sweet to be real. "Make sure the room looks flawless," she said, her voice smooth as honey. "Tonight must be unforgettable." Mara lowered her eyes and nodded, though her heart pounded like a racing drum. While dusting the shelves in the hallway, Mara overheard Vivian whispering again. This time she heard clearer words. "By tonight, everything will be settled," Vivian said softly. "No more waiting." The words were heavy, dangerous, final. Mara stood frozen behind the wall. Feeling her throat tighten, she wanted to run to Andrew immediately. But she forced herself to think if she warned him without proof, Vivian would twist the story, accuse her of lying, maybe even get her fired or punished. Mara felt trapped inside an invisible cage built out of fear and responsibility. Her fear intensified when she walked into the kitchen and saw something strange on the counter. A small silver spoon with a faint bitter smell. It wasn't a normal smell, not from spices or herbs. It smelled like chemicals. Something sharp, something wrong. When Mara leaned closer, her eyes watered slightly from the scent. She quickly washed the spoon even though it wasn't her job. Her hand shook the entire time. She felt as if she had touched something poisonous, something that could hurt Andrew. Later in the afternoon, Vivian left the mansion briefly with her purse, telling Andrew she needed to pick up a special treat for dinner. Mara watched from the window as Vivian hurried into her car, her movements stiff with urgency. Not the movements of a loving wife preparing a romantic night, but the movements of someone executing a plan, someone who knew time was running out. Mara clutched the curtains tightly. Unable to slow her breathing, she wanted to scream for help, or stop Vivian physically, but she was just a maid, invisible in the world of powerful people, unnoticed until needed and discarded when inconvenient. When Vivian returned, she walked straight to the kitchen with a small paper bag. She locked the door behind her. Even the cooks found that strange. They exchanged confused looks but said nothing. Vivian didn't want anyone near the kitchen tonight, and no one dared challenge her authority. Meanwhile, Mara's worry reached a breaking point. Every moment felt like sand slipping through an hourglass, bringing Andrew closer to danger. To calm herself, Mara stepped into the staff's small courtyard for fresh air. But even there she couldn't escape her thoughts. The roses were blooming. The wind was soft. But nothing felt peaceful. She sat on the bench and pressed her hands together, whispering a small prayer. "Please let me find the strength to do the right thing," she murmured. She didn't know what she would do when the moment came, but she felt certain that a moment would come. A moment when she would have to act without hesitation. When she went back inside, she found Andrew in the hallway, talking to his personal assistant on the phone. His voice was calm, hopeful even. "Vivian seems different today," he said, smiling faintly. "Maybe this dinner will finally bring us closer again." Mara's heart twisted painfully. She wished she could tell him the truth. She wished she could protect him from the heartbreak that would soon unfold. But her voice refused to rise. Fear wrapped around it like iron chains. Andrew ended his call and noticed Mara's troubled expression. "You look tired," he said gently. "Everything okay?" Mara opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She simply nodded and walked away quickly before her eyes betrayed everything she was hiding. As the sun slowly descended toward the horizon, the mansion's golden glow shifted into deeper shades of orange and scarlet, signaling the approaching dinner hour. Mara felt her fear sharpening as evening drew closer. The silence in the house grew heavier, thicker, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Vivian was in the kitchen for a long time, mixing, measuring, stirring, preparing. The intoxicating smell of spices filled the air. But behind it, Mara sensed something else, a faint scent that didn't belong, a bitter edge that reminded her of the spoon from earlier. Just before the dinner began, Mara saw Vivian holding the small bottle again, wrapped carefully in the silk handkerchief inside her purse. Vivian moved into the dining room and poured a drink into Andrew's glass, stirring it once, twice, 3 times. Then she stepped back with a satisfied expression, the expression of someone who believed everything was finally falling into place. Mara stood hidden in the shadows, her breath frozen, her eyes wide with terror. She felt her heart drop like a stone, because now she had no doubts at all. The danger was real, the threat was immediate, and Andrew was walking straight toward it. As the clock ticked closer to dinner time, Mara realized something painfully clear. She was the only person who knew what was about to happen. She was the only one who could stop it, and if she failed, the consequences would be irreversible. Evening fell over the Halle mansion like a slow-moving curtain, turning the golden daylight into soft shadows that spread across the marble floors. The house seemed quieter than usual, too quiet, as if everything inside it understood that this night carried a hidden weight. Mara walked through the hallway with trembling hands, her heart thumping hard against her ribs. She had never felt so fearful, yet so alert. Every sound pulling her attention, every moment sharpening her instincts. Vivian spent the last hour preparing herself, and when she stepped out of her room, she looked like a woman from a magazine cover. Her long black dress shimmered under the chandelier lights. Her hair curled perfectly, her makeup flawless. But beneath all that beauty lay something cold and dangerous, something only Mara seemed able to sense. Vivian's smile was thin, stiff, a mask she wore for the world. She adjusted her diamond necklace and glanced at the dining room with a spark of triumph in her eyes. Mara watched her from a distance and felt that same cold wave flow down her spine. The dining table was arranged beautifully, the red candles flickering softly, the plates shining, the roses arranged neatly in crystal vases. It was the kind of setup used for anniversaries or heartfelt moments, yet Mara felt no warmth in it. Everything felt staged, forced, too perfect to be innocent. The soft music playing in the background only added to the tension, like a melody hiding a dark truth behind its beauty. Mara lit the last candle, and when she looked up, she saw Vivian standing in the doorway, watching her closely. "Don't touch the glasses," Vivian said quietly, but with a sharpness that couldn't be hidden. "I've already arranged them." Mara nodded quickly, her eyes lowering to the floor. She knew why Vivian didn't want her near the glasses. Vivian didn't want anyone close to the one drink that mattered most tonight, the one meant for Andrew. Mara's thoughts raced, wondering how she could possibly stop what was coming without being caught. Every second felt like sand slipping away, leaving her less and less time. Minutes later, Andrew appeared at the top of the staircase, wearing a simple dark suit that made him look graceful and tired at the same time. He paused for a moment, taking in the scene, then smiled softly. "Vivian," he called out gently, "the table looks beautiful." Vivian turned toward him, her face glowing with practiced warmth. "Thank you, darling," she replied sweetly. "I wanted tonight to be special." Andrew walked down the stairs slowly, unaware that he was stepping closer to danger with every step he took. Mara watched him helplessly from the side, her heart tightening with each movement. Vivian guided Andrew to the dining table like a hostess guiding a guest. She spoke calmly, charmingly, her voice dripping with affection Andrew had not heard from her in years. Andrew seemed touched, hopeful even. Mara felt her chest ache seeing how much he wanted to believe in her love. Vivian poured wine into her own glass, then gently pushed the other glass, toward Andrew. Her fingers lingered on it for a moment, almost lovingly, before she sat down opposite him. Mara stood in the corner, pretending to be adjusting the curtains, but her eyes never left that glass. She felt her palms sweating, her breath growing shallow. She needed to do something, anything, but she had no plan and no proof. Only the certainty burning in her heart that the drink was dangerous. The moment felt like a rope tightening around her, pulling her closer to a decision she feared but could no longer avoid. Andrew began talking about work, about how he hoped they could rebuild their relationship. His voice was gentle, hopeful, unaware of what sat inches from his fingertips. Vivian nodded and smiled gracefully, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of impatience every time Andrew spoke too long. Mara noticed that Vivian kept glancing at the glass, as if waiting, counting the seconds, urging the moment to arrive. Andrew reached for the drink slowly, his fingers brushing the stem of the glass. Mara felt her entire body jolt, as though electricity had run through her, her breath caught in her throat. Vivian leaned slightly forward, watching closely, her smile growing sharper at the edges. Mara whispered to herself, "Not yet. Please not yet." But Andrew kept lifting the glass higher, bringing it closer to his lips. Each inch felt like a countdown to disaster. The room suddenly felt too small, too hot, too suffocating for Mara. She stepped 1 foot forward without even realizing it. Her hands trembled, her pulse hammered in her ears. She wanted to scream, but something inside her held back, fear gripping her tightly. Andrew lifted the glass halfway, still talking, still unaware of Vivian's burning stare and the silent danger in his hands. But then something happened that froze the moment. As Andrew spoke, he paused to breathe and tilted the glass slightly. Letting the aroma rise, his expression shifted for the briefest second, confused by the strange bitter smell mixed with the wine. "Did you add something new to this?" he asked gently. Looking at Vivian, Vivian's smile flickered, but she quickly recovered. "Just a special herbal tonic," she answered. "It's good for your nerves," Andrew nodded, still unaware, and brought the glass closer again. Mara's fear exploded into panic. She felt as though her body moved before her mind even processed what she was doing. The thought of Andrew drinking that glass, that single moment, was too unbearable to watch any longer. She took another step forward, her voice trapped in her chest, her breath shaking violently. She could feel the moment approaching, the moment where everything inside her would break open and force her to act, whether she was ready or not. Vivian leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed on Andrew's hand. The candlelight reflected in her pupils, making them appear darker, almost predatory. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the moment she had been waiting to see unfold. Mara saw it clearly in her expression: anticipation, hunger, victory. And that expression made Mara understand something deeply. Painfully, unmistakably, Vivian was not unsure or conflicted. She was confident, prepared, and determined. Andrew lifted the glass once more, bringing it inches from his mouth. His fingers tightened around the stem. Ready to take the sip that would change everything, Mara felt something inside her snap. Like a rope that had been pulled too tight for too long, her heart screamed louder than her fear, louder than her doubts, louder than Vivian's power. Mara opened her mouth, her entire body trembling with terror and courage at the same time. The mansion waited, the candles flickered. The air hung still, Andrew's hand hovered in the air. Vivian's smile deepened, and Mara realized she had only one choice left. A choice that would either save a life or destroy her own. Andrew's fingers tightened around the stem of the glass. Lifting it slowly toward his lips, the candlelight reflected off the crystal. Casting tiny sparks across the table, Vivian leaned forward ever so slightly, a small victorious smile forming at the corner of her mouth. For her, this moment was the ending she had worked toward. Quiet, smooth, and perfectly timed. But for Mara, standing a few feet away with her heart pounding like a storm, this moment felt like the edge of a cliff, one wrong second away from disaster. Mara felt her breath collapse in her chest as she watched the glass rise higher. Every instinct inside her screamed, every nerve shook. She could hear her own heartbeat louder than the soft music in the room. Vivian's eyes flickered with expectation. Andrew remained unaware. And the world around Mara seemed to blur into slow motion. The choice she had feared was no longer something she could put off. It was right here, now, demanding her courage. When Andrew tilted the glass toward his mouth, Mara felt her voice tear free from her throat without warning. "Don't drink it," she screamed, her voice echoing through the dining room like an alarm bell. The sudden sound shattered the fragile calm in the room. Andrew froze, his hands suspended midair. Vivian's eyes widened with shock, her smile vanishing instantly. Mara stood there shaking violently, both hands clasped near her chest as if she were holding herself together. The silence that followed her scream was thick. Sharp and electrifying, the candles flickered. The music continued faintly. But everything else stopped. Andrew blinked, confused. Slowly lowering the glass, he stared at Mara, his expression filled with surprise and concern. Vivian's reaction, however, was far from calm. She shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. Her voice filled with controlled fury, her eyes narrowed at Mara like daggers. Mara swallowed hard, her throat tight, but she forced herself to speak. "Sir, please," she whispered shakily, "don't drink that glass." "Something is wrong with it." Andrew looked between the two women. His brows furrowing, he placed the glass on the table gently. Clearly unsettled, "Mara," he said softly. "What are you talking about?" Mara felt her knees weaken but refused to step back. She needed to speak, needed to tell the truth. No matter how dangerous it felt, her fingers trembled. But her voice pushed forward again. "I saw her mixing something earlier," Mara said. Her voice cracking. "She keeps hiding bottles. Making calls, shredding papers. The smell on the spoon? Sir, I swear, something is in that drink," Vivian burst out laughing. But the sound was sharp and empty, not the laughter of someone calm or innocent. "This is absurd," she snapped. "She's lying, Andrew. She's jealous. She wants attention. She doesn't want us to fix our marriage." Vivian walked around the table and placed her hand dramatically on her chest. Trying to appear wounded, "Why would I ever harm you?" she added with fake disbelief. But Andrew wasn't looking at her anymore. He was staring at the glass, his expression shifting into something uncertain, something troubled. Vivian noticed this and quickly reached for the glass. "If you don't trust me," she said, her voice sweetened dangerously, "I'll drink it myself." But Andrew caught her wrist before she could touch the glass. His grip was firm, sharper than anything he had done all night. Vivian stiffened, her eyes widening. Andrew's voice was calm but cold. "No," he said quietly. "Sit down." Vivian pulled her hand away slowly, the mask slipping for a brief second, revealing something dark underneath. The shift in Andrew's eyes told Mara that he had felt something too. Maybe the strange smell from earlier, maybe the tension in the room. Or perhaps the years of silent unhappiness had given him instincts he never used. He turned to Mara again, his voice gentle. "Tell me everything," he said. "From the beginning," Vivian snapped. "Andrew." "This is ridiculous," but he raised his hand to silence her. Something he had never done before. The shock on Vivian's face was immediate. She stepped back, her confidence faltering. Mara realized that her scream had shifted the balance in the room. Andrew was no longer blind to the deeper tension surrounding him. Mara took a deep breath, gathering every piece of courage she had left, and began speaking. She told him everything she had seen, everything she had heard, all the strange movements, the secret phone calls, the shredded documents mentioning inheritance and incapacitation, the strange spoon in the kitchen, the bitter smell in the glass. Vivian tried to interrupt multiple times, but each time Andrew told her to stop. His voice grew firmer with every passing moment, something inside him waking up that had long been quiet. When Mara finished, the room fell silent again. Andrew leaned back slowly, staring at the glass as if it had changed shape. Vivian's face was red with anger. But beneath the anger, Mara saw something else, fear. Real fear. Vivian clenched her jaw, trying to regain control. "This is nonsense," she muttered. "She's inventing lies because she hates me, Andrew. You know how jealous these people can get." But Andrew did not respond. Instead, he stood up slowly and walked toward the glass. He lifted it gently, brought it close to his nose, and inhaled. His expression changed instantly. "Confusion mixing with alarm, Vivian," he said quietly. "What did you put in this?" Vivian stepped back. "I already told you," she snapped. "It's a tonic." "No tonic smells like this," Andrew interrupted sharply. It was the first time he had ever spoken to her with such firmness. Vivian's eyes darted toward the purse sitting near her chair. Mara noticed the look, and so did Andrew. His eyes followed hers, locking onto the purse with growing suspicion. "Bring me your purse," he said. Vivian froze for a second too long, and that hesitation spoke louder than any confession could. Andrew repeated the command, this time with steel in his tone. Vivian shook her head slowly, her voice trembling now. "No, Andrew." "Don't do this, Vivian," he said again. "Bring the purse." She didn't move. Mara could see her breathing quicken, her fingers twitching. Then suddenly, Vivian snatched the purse and turned as if to run. But Andrew stepped in her way, his hand grabbing the handle firmly. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, the truth became undeniable. Andrew pulled the purse from her grasp and opened it. Inside, wrapped in a silk handkerchief, was the small glass bottle, the one Mara had seen earlier, the one Vivian guarded like a treasure. Andrew lifted it slowly. His hand shaking slightly, he read the label, his face draining of color. Vivian reached for it, but he stepped back, his eyes burning with disbelief and betrayal. "Mara," he whispered. "You saved my life tonight." Vivian's mask shattered completely. She stood frozen, her lips trembling, her eyes wide with panic. The confident woman from earlier was gone. replaced by someone cornered, exposed, desperate. The silence felt heavier than ever before. The candles flickered. The music continued faintly in the background. But nothing felt the same. The truth was out, and nothing in the Hawley mansion would ever be the same again. The dining room stood frozen as Andrew held the tiny glass bottle in his trembling hand. The soft candlelight flickered across his face, revealing a mixture of disbelief, hurt, and rising anger. For a man known for his calm nature, this moment was the closest he had ever come to breaking. Mara stood near the wall, her hands clasped tightly together, her heart beating painfully fast. Vivian, on the other hand, stared at Andrew with wild eyes, as though she were watching her perfect plan crumble right in front of her. "Andrew," Vivian whispered, her voice cracking. "Let me explain." But Andrew's expression hardened, and he stepped away from her, the bottle still in his grip. "Explain what?" he asked quietly, though the quietness in his tone was more frightening than anger. "Why would this be in your purse?" His eyes were cold, wounded, and searching for truth somewhere in the chaos of the night. Vivian tried to mask her panic, but her trembling hands betrayed her. "It's not what you think," she insisted desperately. "It's just a strong herbal supplement. I wanted to help you relax. You've been stressed." But Andrew wasn't listening to her voice. He was looking at her eyes, at the fear swirling inside them, at the guilt leaking out from behind every word she spoke. Mara watched silently, praying that Andrew would trust what he saw and not fall for Vivian's manipulation. Vivian took a step forward, reaching for the bottle, but Andrew moved it out of her reach with a sharp motion that made her flinch. Andrew's voice was colder now. "If it's harmless, why were you hiding it?" he asked. "Why does it smell bitter?" Vivian's lips opened, but no words came out. Her silence was a confession more powerful than anything she could have spoken. Mara noticed Andrew's shock slowly transforming into something deeper, something painful. The realization that the person he had trusted for years had just tried to harm him for reasons he still didn't understand. Andrew placed the bottle carefully on the table, then walked toward the hallway. "We're ending this now," he said, his voice steady but heavy with hurt. He pressed a button on the wall, and within seconds, security staff appeared. Vivian gasped, stepping back as if the walls were closing in around her. "Andrew, please, you can't do this," she cried, panic rising in her voice. "You're misunderstanding everything." "I only wanted to." Andrew raised his hand sharply, stopping her words. "Not another lie," he said softly. "Not tonight." The head of security approached, but Andrew shook his head. "No one touches her yet," he said quietly. "I need answers first." The guard stepped back. Staying near the doorway, Vivian stood trembling, cornered like a predator caught in her own trap. Andrew walked to the bar cabinet on the side of the room and opened a drawer. Inside, it was a small remote for the mansion's hidden surveillance system. Andrew had installed additional cameras a few months ago, not because he suspected harm, but because he wanted better security after a series of break-ins in wealthy neighborhoods. Tonight, those cameras would reveal more than he ever expected. Andrew tapped a button, and a screen descended from the ceiling. Mara gasped softly. Vivian's face drained of color as she realized what was coming. The screen lit up, showing security footage from the kitchen over the past few weeks, in clip after clip. Vivian was seen adding small droplets from the same bottle into Andrew's drinks, stirring the liquid quickly before leaving the kitchen. The footage captured her pacing nervously, whispering on phone calls during late hours, hiding bottles in different places. Each clip adding more weight to the truth. Vivian screamed, "Turn it off," and lunged toward the screen, but a guard held her back gently, preventing her from touching it. Andrew did not look at her. His eyes were locked on the screen, watching betrayal unfold frame by frame. His breath grew heavier with each clip, each truth slicing deeper than the last. Mara felt tears sting her eyes, not for Vivian, but for Andrew, who had given so much trust to a woman who saw his kindness as weakness. He had spent years loving someone who viewed him only as an obstacle to wealth and freedom. When the final clip ended, silence swallowed the room. Andrew turned slowly to Vivian, his voice quieter than ever. "Why?" he asked. "What did I ever do to deserve this?" Vivian shook her head, tears falling down her cheeks now, but they were tears of fear, not remorse. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I had no choice." "No choice," Andrew repeated, stunned. "You always had a choice." Vivian collapsed into a chair, her hands covering her face. Then finally, after a long, shaking breath, she spoke the truth she had tried so hard to bury. "I was drowning in debt," she admitted. "Before I married you, I hid things. Big things. Money I owed to dangerous people." Her voice trembled. "And when they found me again, they demanded everything back all at once." "I didn't have it." Andrew's eyes widened. "So you decided to kill me?" he asked in disbelief. Vivian shook her head frantically. "No, not kill you," she whispered. "Just make you dependent, weak, unable to manage business for a while. The lawyers said that if you were unwell, I could temporarily control your assets. I just needed time. I didn't want you dead, Andrew. I just needed your signature, your power, your money to save myself." Mara felt sick hearing those words. Vivian hadn't been trying to harm Andrew out of hatred, but out of cold calculation, greed, and selfish survival. Andrew felt the weight of the betrayal crushing him. He stepped back and rubbed his forehead, shaking his head slowly. "You were going to risk my health, my life, for money," he whispered. "For debts you hid from me." Vivian reached toward him, tears falling down her cheeks. "Andrew, listen. I still love you," she cried. But Andrew stepped away. "No," he said firmly. "You love what I can give you." His voice broke slightly as he added, "But you never loved me." The guards moved closer. Waiting for Andrew's instruction, Vivian looked around desperately. "Andrew, please," she begged. "You can't call the police." "If they find out what I did?" Andrew closed his eyes slowly, pain tightening his jaw. "You tried to poison me," he said quietly. "I don't have a choice anymore." Vivian collapsed into sobs, but Andrew did not move toward her. Instead, he turned to Mara, his voice gentle again. "Thank you," he whispered. "You saved my life tonight." Mara felt her throat tighten, tears welling in her eyes. "I just did what anyone should do," she whispered. But Andrew shook his head. "No," he said. Most people would have stayed silent. The guards gently took Vivian by the arms, guiding her toward the door as she cried and begged. But neither Andrew nor Mara said anything more to her. The truth was out. The web of lies had been destroyed, and the Halle mansion would never be the same again. Asterisk. The police cars arrived at the Halle mansion just after midnight, their flashing lights casting red and blue shadows over the grand white walls. The mansion, which had once symbolized elegance and peace, now felt like a courtroom where truths had finally been exposed. Vivian was escorted out of the house, her wrists cuffed gently but firmly, her face streaked with tears and ruined makeup. Her cries echoed faintly in the night air, but they could not erase the damage she had caused. Andrew watched from the doorway, his face pale, his expression hollow, as if a part of him had shattered beyond repair. Mara stood behind him, her hands trembling. Unsure if she should stay or step away, she had never imagined she would witness something like this. A billionaire's life falling apart in front of her eyes. Vivian's betrayal felt heavy not only for Andrew but for everyone who had lived and worked in the mansion. The staff gathered quietly at a distance, whispering among themselves, stunned by the revelation. They had sensed the tension, but none had imagined the truth would be so dark. When the police car finally drove away with Vivian inside, the mansion fell into complete silence, the kind of silence that arrives after a storm. Thick and echoing, Andrew closed the door slowly, as though even the act of shutting it required strength he no longer had. He walked to the center of the hallway and leaned against the wall. Covering his face with both hands, Mara hesitated for a moment before taking a small step forward. Her voice soft as a whisper, "Sir, are you all right?" she asked gently. Andrew lowered his hands, revealing eyes filled with pain. "Betrayal and exhaustion. I don't know, Mara," he whispered. "I really don't know." He sank onto the edge of a nearby bench, and for a long moment he simply stared at the floor, as if trying to understand how everything in his life had changed in one night. Mara approached him slowly, her heart aching for him. She had seen him tired before, stressed before, but never broken. "I'm so sorry this happened," she said softly. Andrew looked up at her, his eyes glassy. "You don't need to be sorry," he said quietly. "You didn't cause any of this. You saved me from it." Hearing those words made Mara's throat tighten. She nodded gently, not knowing what else to say. Andrew took a deep breath, his shoulders trembling slightly. "I keep thinking, how long was she planning this?" he whispered. "How long has she seen me as nothing but an opportunity?" His voice cracked and he looked away. Unable to hold eye contact for a moment, Mara wished she could take his pain away. But she knew nothing she said could erase the betrayal he felt. Trust, once broken in such a cruel way, could not be rebuilt easily. "You're not alone, sir," she whispered. "Everyone in this house cares about you. We're here for you." Andrew gave a faint, grateful smile, the kind that carried sadness underneath. Hours passed slowly, and eventually the mansion staff returned to their quarters. Leaving Andrew and Mara in the quiet hallway, Andrew finally stood up, wiping his face. "I need some time alone," he said softly. "Thank you." "Mara," she nodded and stepped back respectfully, watching him walk up the stairs like a man carrying invisible weight on his shoulders. The next morning, the mansion was unusually still. No sound of Vivian demanding things, no high heels clicking on marble. No sharp voice echoing through the halls. It felt peaceful but also painfully empty. Mara woke early, unsure what the day would bring. Part of her still scared that things might somehow get worse. She walked downstairs and found Andrew sitting in the study. Staring at a cup of untouched coffee, he looked tired but calmer, as if he had cried through the night and emptied enough grief to breathe again. "Good morning," Mara said softly from the doorway. Andrew nodded slowly. "Good morning, Mara," he replied. "Thank you for checking on me." She stepped inside, feeling his sadness like a cold wind. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked. "A little," he answered. Enough to think clearly. He looked out the window before adding, "I called my lawyer last night. Vivian will face charges, and there will be no negotiation this time." The firmness in his voice was new, a sign that he was slowly regaining control over his life. But behind that firmness lay a wounded heart still trying to understand why someone he loved had chosen betrayal over honesty. In the following days, investigators visited the mansion frequently, questioning staff, collecting evidence. Reviewing the security footage Andrew had shown, the bottle was sent to a laboratory, and results confirmed that it contained a dangerous sedative capable of causing long-term damage if consumed regularly. Hearing that confirmation left Andrew visibly shaken. He had been drinking his wife's special tonic for weeks, unaware of the slow poison entering his body. The realization made him sit down and bury his face in his hands again. Mara stood beside him silently, offering him quiet support as days passed. The mansion slowly tried to return to normal rhythm, but nothing felt the same. The staff moved carefully, speaking softly. As though afraid to disturb the fragile balance inside the house, Andrew spent most of his time in his study or walking the garden alone. Mara watched him from a distance, wishing he had someone to talk to, someone who could understand the magnitude of his pain. Vivian had not only betrayed his trust, she had shattered his sense of security, leaving scars that would take a long time to heal. One afternoon, as Mara dusted the bookshelves in the study, Andrew suddenly spoke, his voice quiet. "Do you think I was blind?" he asked. Not looking at her, Mara paused, unsure how to answer. "No, sir," she said gently. "You trusted her because you loved her." Andrew let out a faint breath, almost a sad laugh. "Love?" he murmured. "I guess love can be the very thing that blinds us." Mara placed the duster on the table and took a step closer. "Trusting someone isn't a weakness," she said softly, "but hurting someone who trusts you, that is unforgivable." Andrew looked at her, his eyes softening, filled with appreciation for her wisdom. For a moment, he simply stared at her, as if realizing how much strength and courage she carried beneath her gentle nature. As days turned into a week, Andrew slowly began to recover, not fully healed, but steady enough to return to small routines. He started eating meals again, reading newspapers, attending light meetings through video calls, and each day, Mara played a quiet but important role in helping him stabilize, bringing tea, checking on him, making sure he wasn't isolating himself too much. Every time she walked into the room, Andrew felt a little safer, a little less alone. The media eventually caught the story. Headlines spread about a billionaire nearly poisoned by his own wife and the brave maid who saved him. Reporters arrived at the gates trying to get statements. But Andrew refused all interviews. He did not want the scandal to define his life, and he wanted to protect Mara's privacy as well. But inside the city, whispers traveled quickly, and Mara's name became known not for her position, but for her courage. One evening, Andrew approached her in the kitchen, his voice gentle. "Mara," he said, "I want to thank you again." She shook her head modestly. "You don't need to." "Sir," but Andrew stepped closer, his voice sincere. "You do not realize how much courage it took to speak up that night," he said. "You saved my life. And maybe the course of everything that comes next." Mara felt warmth rise in her chest. Unsure how to respond, the mansion, once haunted by fear and lies, slowly transformed into a place of healing. Andrew and Mara formed an unspoken bond built not on position or power but on truth, loyalty, and shared battles. Their connection grew quietly, like a seed planted in darkness finding light after a storm. But neither of them knew that their lives were about to change again, in ways even more unexpected than the night of betrayal. Asterisk, the weeks that followed brought a gentle calm to the Halle mansion, a calm that felt almost unfamiliar after the chaos that had shaken its walls. Vivian's court hearings progressed slowly. Reporters crowded the gates daily, and the world outside buzzed with scandal. Yet inside the mansion, something entirely different was happening, something quieter, something softer. A slow healing that began to stitch broken pieces back together. Andrew spent most mornings in the garden now, walking among the roses with his hands tucked behind his back. The sun warmed his shoulders, the breeze carried scents of jasmine, and for the first time in a long while he began to notice beauty again. Beauty he had ignored for years while living in a marriage built on illusions. Mara often watched him from the window as she polished the furniture or arranged flowers in the hallway. She noticed how his shoulders no longer looked as heavy, how his steps grew steadier day by day. One morning, Andrew found Mara in the kitchen preparing breakfast for the staff. Her hands moved gracefully, slicing fruit, arranging plates, humming softly under her breath. He paused at the doorway, watching her for a moment, then walked in quietly. "Good morning." "Mara," he said gently. Mara startled slightly, then smiled shyly. "Good morning, sir," she replied. "Are you feeling better today?" "A little," Andrew said, leaning against the counter. "Better than I've felt in a long time." He looked at the steam rising from the kettle and added softly, "If it weren't for you, none of this healing would even be possible." Mara's cheeks warmed at his words. She lowered her eyes, embarrassed. "I only did what was right," she whispered. Andrew smiled faintly. "Doing what's right is sometimes the hardest thing a person can do," he said. "And you did it without thinking of the consequences for yourself," Mara didn't reply. But her heart filled with a quiet warmth she hadn't felt before. Later that week, Andrew made a surprising decision. He gathered the staff in the main hallway and thanked each one of them for their support during the difficult days. Then he turned to Mara and announced something no one expected. "From today onward," he said softly, "Mara will become the senior household manager." The staff gasped softly. It was a prestigious position, one usually given only to people with years of experience. Mara's hands flew to her mouth in shock. "Sir, I don't know what to say," she whispered. Andrew smiled warmly. "Just accept it," he said. "You earn this more than anyone else." The promotion not only increased her responsibilities but also her income, allowing her to support her family better and dream of things she once thought impossible. When she called her mother that night to share the news, her mother cried with joy, telling her how proud she was. Mara felt tears slip down her own cheeks, grateful for a future she never imagined would come her way. Meanwhile, Andrew's emotional healing continued slowly. He began attending therapy, something he never imagined he would need. He attended board meetings again, though cautiously, and spent more meaningful time with people who cared about him. The staff began seeing glimpses of the cheerful Andrew Hawley they once knew before his marriage had drained the light from him. And every day, without fail, Mara remained a quiet presence in his life, offering gentle words, warm smiles, and silent support. One afternoon, Andrew was in his study when he found a notebook he had once used years ago. Inside were sketches he had made during better times, drawings of architecture, landscapes, designs for gardens he once dreamed of building. Seeing them again stirred something inside him, a reminder that there was a life he had paused for too long. He closed the notebook gently and made a decision. He would rebuild not only his emotional world but also the physical one around him. A week later, he approached Mara with a hesitant smile. "I'm thinking of starting a new project," he said. "A community library in the lower district, something accessible, something meaningful." Mara's eyes lit up with admiration. "That sounds wonderful," she said. "People there really need a place like that." Andrew nodded thoughtfully. "I'd like your help," he added softly. Mara blinked in surprise. "My help?" she asked. "But sir, I'm not—" "You're exactly the kind of person I want involved," Andrew said with a gentle firmness. "You understand people. You see things others miss. And you care." Mara felt her heart swell with gratitude. I would be honored," she said, her voice warm and sincere. Andrew smiled, feeling something gentle unfolding between them, something that didn't need to be spoken yet. Days turned into weeks, and the project became a bonding bridge between them. They visited locations together, met architects, reviewed designs, and discussed colors, spaces, and community programs. Spending time together felt natural, effortless, safe. Andrew found comfort in Mara's presence, and Mara found strength in his kindness. Their conversations grew longer, their smiles warmer, their silences comfortable. But despite the closeness growing between them, both of them remained careful, respectful of boundaries. Andrew was still healing from betrayal, and Mara carried her modesty like a soft shield. They moved slowly, gently, like two people learning to trust life again. And in those slow steps, something beautiful took root. Not romance, not yet, but a deep connection built on truth, shared pain, and mutual respect one late afternoon. As the sun painted the garden in shades of gold, Andrew and Mara walked along the stone path, discussing the final details of the library's reading room. The flowers swayed in the breeze, and the moment felt peaceful. Andrew stopped walking and looked at Mara thoughtfully. "You've changed my life, Mara," he said quietly. "More than you know." Mara's breath caught slightly. She looked up at him, her eyes soft. "You've changed mine too," she replied. "Before all this happened, I didn't believe my voice mattered. But that night taught me something about courage." Andrew smiled gently. "That night taught me something too," he said. "It taught me that trust can come from the most unexpected places." For a moment, they simply stood there, watching the sky change colors. The silence between them wasn't heavy now, but comforting. Like a shared understanding they didn't need to explain. Eventually, the library project was completed. It stood tall and welcoming in the heart of the city, painted in warm colors, filled with books, art, and soft reading corners. At the opening ceremony, Andrew gave a small speech, thanking everyone who helped. But when he spoke about Mara, his voice softened. "This place exists because of someone who reminded me that courage doesn't come from strength," he said, "but from heart." Mara felt tears blur her vision, humbled by the honor. As months passed, Andrew's life became brighter, more meaningful, less lonely. Vivian's chapter had ended, not with bitterness, but with closure, and in its place, a new chapter began, one filled with healing, purpose, and quiet companionship. Mara continued working at the mansion, but her role in Andrew's life became much more than that of an employee. She became a trusted confidant, a steady presence, a symbol of hope. And though neither of them spoke the words aloud yet, everyone around them could see it clearly. They were walking toward a future connected by loyalty, kindness, and destiny, a future that began the night Mara cried, "Don't drink it," a cry that not only saved a billionaire's life, but also transformed her own forever.